My name is Gil Robertson. I am the president of the African American Film Critics Association, and we want to congratulate you for your growing career,
Thank you.
and particularly, obviously, your success, which we're hearing a lot of awards talk about for Little Fires Everywhere.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Absolutely. I'm going to throw you off to our members who are participating today, starting with Katia Woods in Philadelphia, Al McGhee in South Florida, Carolyn Hinds in Toronto, Reginald Pounder in Chicago, and Rhonda Rasha Penrice in Atlanta. So you guys take it over.
Hi, Lexi. It's great to see you and speak with you. So my first question has to be, of course, it's going to be about Little Fires Everywhere. And the thing with the show, it focuses a lot on relationships between mothers and their daughters and their children. But one thing I really wanted to ask you about was how art ties all of that in together as a theme. And for you as an actor, that is your art. But is there another form of art that you use to help you interpret your work? For instance, if you do photography, singing, painting, is there anything else that you use to help you become better at expressing yourself as an actor?
Yeah, well, for the role of Pearl, I really focused on poetry and music to help me tap into the role, because Pearl is a poet, and a lot of times, you see her writing down in her notebook, but when I first read it in the script and in the book, I was curious as to what she was writing about when you do see her having those quiet moments to herself. So what I did before we got into filming, I would write poems as Pearl about things that Pearl is going through. So I wrote poems about her relationship with Mia. I wrote poems about her relationship with Trip, her relationship with Elena, because I feel as though it connected me to the character just a bit more, so I could really dig deep and understand what she was going through, what was running through her mind, just everything that Pearl was going through in those moments where you do see her in her room, whether she's crying or just having a moment to herself. What is she doing? What is going through her mind? And I feel as though it kind of helped me get more connected towards her, because a lot of times I think it's easy to judge the characters that we're playing. But as an actor, in my opinion, it's my job to never judge what my character is doing, because I feel as though as soon as I start to judge, as soon as I start to look at her choices and be like, oh, well, I wish she would have done this, or I wish she would have done this, then the performance becomes inauthentic to me, because I'm not a writer. I'm not the writer. These are the choices that the writer made for Pearl. And so to properly play her authentically, I have to believe the choices that she's making. So I use poetry as an outlet for that. And then with the music side, because Little Fires Everywhere is set in 1997, I wanted to make sure that I had as much knowledge as to what it was like to be a teenager during that time, since I was born in 2003. So I went back and I listened to all the music from like the top 100s, just the hottest music from that time. Then I also went back and listened to some music just from before 1997, music that I think, she would listen to with Mia when they're on the road, artists that I think Mia would have played around the household when she was younger. I listened to music that, she would have listened to with Lexi Richardson or Elena Richardson, things that she hears in the Richardson households or at school, that, wants her to be more connected, with that popular side and, the crowd at school. So music and poetry were my two outlets when it came to just really digging deep into the character of Pearl.
And was there either a particular poem that you would have read or written, or a song from that era that really connected with you personally, apart from the character, where you would have been like that, you never heard it before, you were like, oh, okay, so this music from the 1997 was pretty banging?
Yeah, I think that there were a lot of them. Before the way I grew up was, my parents would always play just old school music, so there wasn't much that I hadn't heard before. I was pretty familiar with all the artists and all the songs, but I think one of the songs that kind of just really resonated, I knew about it, prior to filming, was probably to Zion by Lauryn Hill. That was like a bonding moment that Miss Kerry Washington and I had, because we felt as though that would be like a total jam between me and Pearl. I think it, represents their story, where they come from, just so perfectly. And just the beautiful relationship and bond that they have, at least before they arrive at Shaker Heights. So I think To Zion would probably be the song that stuck out to me most during the experience.
Fair. Thank you.
Of course.
Hello, Lexi. This is Al McGhee on Your Entertainment Ticket here in Florida. Wow, I really enjoyed Little Fires Everywhere. And also, I really enjoyed Pearl, your character, Pearl. Now, tell me about Pearl, how that you were able to get into Pearl, even though that might not have been your own personal life experience. But with Pearl, how were you able to communicate your acting to become Pearl?
Well, besides writing poetry, I also created Venn diagrams. And so I created Venn diagrams for Pearl and all the other characters in the story. Even if, Pearl didn't come into contact, like if it was BB or Bill, I still created Venn diagrams, just so that I could really understand, get a deeper connection towards her, and kind of why she was making the choices that she did. Like what drew her to like Trip, or what drew her to want to be Lexi's best friend, even in the midst of, all the negativity that, the Richardsons were going through. So I created Venn diagrams for that. But then the first Venn diagram that I created was a Venn diagram between Pearl and me, so that I could just really understand her a bit more. Because like I said earlier, it's never my job to judge my character or my character's choices. And so I wanted to make sure that whether, whatever she was going through, I really had a deeper connection and a deeper meaning as to why she was making these choices. And if I was in her position, would I be making the same choices? Because I think it's so easy sometimes when we read books or when we watch movies or TV shows, we see a character doing something and we're like, oh, I wish that character would have done this or this. But then you have to really sit down and think, well, what would I do if I was in this situation? Maybe I would have done the same thing. Maybe I would have done something slightly different. And so I wanted to make sure that I really had a deeper connection and a deeper meaning as to why she was making these choices, why she was treating Mia like this, or why she was treating Moody like this, just all those type of things. And I also created playlists as Pearl for every episode, where whether it was, she was going through heartbreak, whether it was she was going through, first day of school, I wanted to make sure that, I don't know, like I said, I use art as a way to kind of, get a deeper connection to these characters that I'm playing. And so I would listen to these playlists every day before I would walk onto set. And that, yet again, that honestly helped me, grow a deeper connection to the story and to the character. And I think a lot of the cast, we really use art, especially music, as an outlet to be able to tell the story properly.
And just a follow-up question. When did you, at what age, learn that you wanted to be an actor? And what type of training did you do to become an actor?
Well, I'm originally from Washington, D.C. The first time that I ever wanted to just honestly be involved with the arts was about 3 years old. I originally started off as a ballet dancer. And so I used to be a ballet dancer. And that was like the first time I ever fell in love with anything involving the arts. And then by the time I was 6 years old, I was playing piano and singing. And that's when my love for like musical theater really started to grow. My parents, like I said, would play like just, all the greats in the households. They would introduce me to all, the classic movies, all the classic actors. So growing up, I never really was missing that sort of knowledge when it came to just the history of the arts. And then I want to say by the time I was 9 years old I was like, okay, I think I actually want to be an actor. This is what I want to do. And so my first role was I was in Lion King I was in the Lion King national tour, and so I played young Nala. That was my first time doing anything, and to me that was huge, because it was a role where I got to not only act, but I also got to sing and dance. And so that was my first time like doing everything in one. When it comes to training though, I never really I went to like a summer camp when I was younger back home in DC. I would always go to like different performing arts summer camps. And then, like I said, I would, take ballet classes or singing classes. And once I moved to LA was when I really started to dig deep into acting classes. But even now, I really don't, have the proper training. I kind of get my training from set, from, being around actors like Kerry Washington and Reese Witherspoon, and just learning from them, and also making sure that, with whatever opportunity I get, I'm branching out and making sure that I'm asking questions and I'm being observant. And, some days when it came to Little Fires Everywhere, I would shadow not only Kerry and Reese, but I would also shadow the directors and the producers and the writers. And I also sat in on editing sessions just so that I got a clearer understanding of the full process of creating a series and the full process of creating a movie, as not only I'm an aspiring producer as well. I have my own production company called Ultimate Dreamer Productions. And so I wanted to make sure that I was also branching out with whatever opportunity I got to make sure that I learned everything as possible.
Thank you very much.
Of course, thank you.
Oh, I love your dedication to craft. It's so refreshing to see. But, piggybacking on that, what specifically did you learn from Reese and from Kerry, and how has it helped you to grow and especially stand firmer as a young woman in this industry?
I think the biggest thing that I learned from Miss Kerry and Miss Reese was how to unapologetically take up space as a young Black actress in Hollywood. Because I think, a lot of times it's like, oh, well, I learned, how to act, or I learned this, or I learned that. But the deeper meaning of what they taught us was just the fact that always show up prepared. Always show up not necessarily just knowing your lines, but everybody else's lines. Always make sure that you know every detail and every aspect of the scene, and never be afraid or timid to have ideas, to have questions. Don't let anybody, I'm only 16, I was 15 at the time. And so a lot of times as a young actor, it's very easy to get lost in the midst of the production, especially when you're working with A-list actors. And so they taught us that, they never looked at us as though, we were younger actors that were coming into the business with a bunch of A-list actors. We all were treated equally. And I think that created such a comfortable and space environment for us to be able to play with these characters and for us to be able to play with these scenes. And they taught us just, how to unapologetically take up space and to never be afraid to use our own voices when it comes to ideas that we have, or when it comes to, if something doesn't feel right or authentic to our character, if there's a scene that doesn't feel right or a line that doesn't feel right, say it. Because if it doesn't feel authentic to us, it's not going to feel authentic to the audience. And so that's what they taught us, just never be afraid, never be timid, never feel as though our voice isn't going to be heard, because at least on that set, it was definitely heard.
Hi, Lexi. Kathy Woods out of Philadelphia. Piggybacking a little bit of something that you said, just being a young Black actress, it seems right now we are in an intersection. And, Pearl was a full character. She wasn't the friend that doesn't have anything to do. And what do you want the industry to hear? Because we are still starved for stories, especially at your age group, coming of age stories that aren't always centered on trauma, where you get to be the heroine, where you get to be the girl that has curiosity and all these other things. What would you like to see more as you progress in your, for you to have more options in your career?
Well, I think the biggest thing is, especially during this time, we see a lot of Hollywood, coming out and showing support of, like, especially the Black Lives Matter movement. But I think my biggest thing would just be, let's also make sure that we are properly telling these stories that also support this movement. So whether that is with, cop propaganda, making sure that we tell the authentic truth of sometimes what our people do have to go through when it comes to encounters with the cops. And I think that that's what was so powerful when it comes to Little Fires Everywhere, was the first scene that you see me and Pearl in, the first time that you see into their life is actually an encounter with the police. And, for this to be an adaptation of a book, and you don't know, when you first read the book, you don't know what Grace, me, and Pearl are, that in itself says something. And so, you know, continuing my journey in my career, I want to make sure that, you know, we're continuing to tell stories where Black girls, you know, of all shades are, you know, the main character. You know, we do get to have these beautiful love stories that don't involve trauma. We get to be the hero. We get to be this, you know, we get to be the superheroes, because in my opinion, Black women are superheroes. So I want to continue to, you know, push those narratives forward, and tell those stories. And that's actually part of why I started my own production company. I named my production company Ultimate Dreamer Productions, and an ultimate dreamer is an audacious visionary. And so the whole point behind Ultimate Dreamer Productions is to finance and support the voice and perspective of underrepresented diverse stories and underrepresented diverse artists. And so I know growing up, I didn't really have too much representation on TV or in the media. And if it was, then it was usually the broken character or the sidekick or the best friend, or, you know, just the broken down Black woman that was going through so much trauma. And so I want to continue to tell these stories, and make sure that we give voice to characters like Pearl, so that no young kid, boy, girl that looks like me ever has to grow up and see themselves, you know, not properly being represented in the media, not properly hearing their story or seeing their story not being properly represented in the media.
To follow up, the relationship with you and Kerry's character, you know, obviously there are some things going on, but Pearl is also trying to let Kerry's character know that she's trying to assert her right to have her life, to have a life, to be present, to enjoy things, you know what I mean? And that's hard when that's your mom and somebody you love. That's like, I think the hardest thing in mother-daughter relationships, the moment when you are saying, I love you, but I don't agree with you. So how did you approach that? And have you had moments in your life where you're like, Mom, I love you and I respect you. However, I'm choosing to do this.
Yeah. I think all, you know, kids, especially teenagers, go through things where they don't necessarily agree with their mom or their dad. There are times where I know I've definitely have not agreed with my parents, but, you know, I still respect them and love them. And we can find like a happy medium and a healthy balance where, you know, we compromise. And yeah, but I don't necessarily know, when it came to approaching that relationship, it was very organic for Miss Kerry and I. Miss Kerry is like a second mom to me now. And so just the relationship, we never really had like sat down and had actual conversations when it came to just like the push and pull between them. I think we both came into filming with an understanding of what both of them were going through. My apologies, of what both characters were going through, and just the fact, at the end of the day, you know, I think so many people, you know, they watch Little Fires Everywhere, they read it, and they want to like dig deeper and kind of like analyze Pearl and be like, oh, well, Pearl is hanging out with the Richardsons, so she wants to be white, or Pearl is doing this, so she wants, but that's not necessarily it. Pearl, at the end of the day, is just a young 15-year-old Black girl that is trying to find herself without her mother's guidance, or actually without her mother's guidance, because it's multiple mothers. And it's actually something that we touch on in the 8th episode, where it's the final poem before the show ends, where Pearl says, was I myself for one of my mothers? And I think that statement in itself is just such a powerful statement, because she's not necessarily just talking about Mia, but she's talking about all the mother figures that are in her life or would have been in her life, whether that's with Pauline or Madeline, or even Elena. Elena, she definitely considered Elena as almost a mother figure. And so it's really, at the end of the day, everybody wants to make it complicated, but Pearl is just a young 15-year-old girl, like the rest of the characters, that's trying to find their place in the world without anyone's guidance, you know, trying to really dig deep and find her truth. This is her first time having any sense of stability, so of course she's going to mess up. Of course she's, you know, there are going to be times where she does get disrespectful with her mother, which I don't condone, but there's just a simpler meaning and a simpler, I don't know, there's just a simpler meaning to Pearl, other than, you know, her trying to be white or trying to, you know, disrespect her mom, because that's not what she's trying to do. She's just trying to fit in. She's just trying to find herself and really, you know, find her place in the world.
Definitely. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, this is Reggie Ponder, the real critic out of Chicago, and I actually wanted to talk to you also about the relationship with you and Kerry. It was so interesting to me to watch that relationship. You made me mad, by the way. Um, but there, as a male, the relationship that you guys had drew me to watch that. It was that just that relationship. I stopped to watch because from a Black perspective, to see all those emotions that you guys had, being nice to each other, loving to each other, hating each other at one point. Can you really talk about that relationship? Because it was really good in the way it came off on the screen.
Thank you. Well, like I said, Miss Kerry and I have an authentic, bond and relationship. And so when it did come to preparing, we originally started off having a couple of conversations, but more as to how we would play the dynamic between me and Pearl. And it's such an interesting and complex dynamic as itself. When Celeste Ng first wrote the book, like I said, she didn't ever specify their race. So it was very open. People thought, oh, well, me and Pearl are white. Or, oh, me and Pearl are Asian. But for them to cast two Black actors to play, these roles meant something so much more, to us. And so we definitely had to sit down and have these conversations where, okay, this is already a completely complex and dynamic just duo. How are we now going to add the layer of just the authenticity of a single Black mother and daughter and what that looks like? Because it is very different. We definitely had to add, there are some things that, whether that was even just an improv where it was like, okay, I know growing up in a Black household, with a Black mom, maybe this isn't, something that I would say or I would do. And Miss Kerry, as, a Black mom, would be like, yeah, no, this isn't the dynamic between me and my daughter or me and my mom. And so I think it was very interesting, but we never really had conversations where it came to how we were specifically gonna play like the push and pull. But there were times, Miss Kerry is definitely a method actor. So there would be times where, we would be in those argument scenes and she would be yelling, whether, even after they yelled cut. But it kept that adrenaline and energy going. I remember my first scene, my first like emotional scene with her was the scene where we're coming back home from the junkyard and, it's the cop car escorts Moody and I back home. And I just vividly remember that day was just such an interesting day because it was my first time ever really having a scene like that with an actor that I like really has, respected for such a long time and has been watching. So I wasn't expecting her to kind of be method with it, but the more and more we got into the swing of things, the more and more it just worked for us. Whether if it was off screen, off camera, they would already yell cut and we would still be arguing, or we would still kind of like be pushing each other's buttons to make sure that when they yelled action again, we were on it. And most times, even throughout that first entire scene, most of that is improv. Most of that is not written. And it just shows just the authenticity of the relationship that we had on set and the bond that we had on set, where it would be like that whole spiel where I'm just saying, Elena respects her kids. This is what Elena does. All of that was completely improv. None of that was written. And so I think it just goes to show also how much of a giving and kind actor Miss Kerry is, because I don't necessarily know if I would have been able to do some of those scenes without her. She definitely pulled something out of me that I didn't know I had in me, because Pearl is such an emotionally demanding role, and going into the role I didn't know if I was going to be able to portray her properly, but having her by my side, acting with her, I feel as though I was able to play Pearl properly due to her and just her energy that she gave off and, gave me during those scenes.
Well, it surely showed on the screen. So thank you for that. And then I'm sure you're going to share one of those poems with us now that you're going to get the book and read us one of those poems. Yes, no?
I don't actually have it. I'm
sorry.
My
goodness, what is wrong with you? Didn't you know you were going to see us today? Next question.
I'm sorry.
Hi, it's Carolyn again. So my next question kind of goes off of where you were talking about with Pearl being an emotionally demanding character. Now, she for me was very frustrating, and one particular aspect was the way how there's a lot of racial microaggressions throughout the show, and that's what I considered one of the little fires that burned throughout the show was the small microaggressions. And there are moments where in real life those microaggressions, we either have to decide to ignore them, let those little fires just simmer in the corner, or we're going to watch them explode into an explosion. And I wanted to ask you about how has that affected you in real life? Because for me as a Black woman, and then as a young and now as a grown up woman, there's microaggressions that I notice in real life, but also in the show. And I wish there were moments I was so frustrated with Pearl because I was like, Pearl, what she just said was an insult. That was not a compliment. I wanted her to be just more assertive about that, right? And for you, has playing that character and seeing those little microaggressions on screen, has that made you more aware as a young Black woman about microaggressions that would occur in real life?
Yes and no. Growing up in DC, I was born just around the time the gentrification started to really take over DC. And growing up, I went to, at least from my elementary school experience, not from my middle school experience, but I was surrounded by mainly white and Hispanic kids. And so it was always kind of something, those microaggressions were always kind of something, even from like kindergarten or first grade, that I was accustomed to. And so growing up like Pearl, when it comes to Pearl and dealing with those microaggressions, sometimes I don't necessarily realize, I don't think she realizes that, those are insults, only because of her, just her prior experiences, whether that's with school or friends. You also have to remember, Pearl, they only stay, in a town for just a couple of months. And sometimes Pearl doesn't necessarily make friends. And I think that's why she wants to hold on to that relationship with Lexi Richardson, because she's never had that before. She's never had the best friend where she can sleep over, where, it's like her mom, like you're on a first name basis with her mom, and like all her siblings like you, and everybody like gets along, at least, to her. She thinks that Lexi is living this picture perfect world. And so to her, she thinks that, well, okay, well, this is what, friends do. They just, they joke, and they go back and forth with each other. So I think that, at first that's what she's thinking. But then really when we start to get into like the abortion storyline, Pearl starts to see, okay, this isn't normal. This is just, I think this is starting to be blatant racism. And there's just not the same respect on both sides. And so I don't necessarily think that, Pearl is oblivious, because, Pearl obviously understands microaggressions and racism, because in the first scene with Mia and Pearl, Mia says, hands on the dashboard, baby, and she immediately knows what to do. But I think that Pearl has never really had that relationship before, and so she doesn't necessarily know how to go about it. And I think especially during like episode 3 is when Pearl starts to have revelations of, okay, some of this isn't normal, but I'm going to just let it slide because this is a person that I consider to be my friend, and I want to keep this friendship. But especially by episode 5, she realizes that this isn't normal. When it comes to my own experiences with microaggressions, I don't think that the story has really, or me playing Pearl, has opened my eyes more to microaggressions, because like I said, growing up, I had to deal with them all the time, whether it was comments about my hair, comments about my skin, like I just always had to deal with it. And so I think that playing Pearl and bringing voice to this story and character, something that I find so beautiful is the fact that especially young Black girls that watched the show reached out to me, whether it was, via social media or even just in person, and told me, I actually felt seen and heard and represented times, because you don't necessarily see microaggressions play out in TV shows where, these are things that Black and brown kids have to go through every day. And we don't tell that story a lot, that this is just the normal experience of just growing up Black. And so, while I didn't necessarily learn much about microaggressions, I'm just glad that it gave story, like a voice to that story and that perspective of that dynamic of what it's like to be a young Black girl growing up.
So just a small follow-up from that. So there's a scene in particular where Pearl meets David, Lexi's boyfriend, And there's this exchange, it's very small, it's very short moment, but to me it said a lot also about Pearl's experience, where he made a joke and it was like she wasn't sure if it was a joke about her, about what Elena had said, or if she was like, is it just that she didn't understand it because of her experiences, as you mentioned, like she and her mom had a transient life, like they moved from town to town to town. So she wasn't familiar with interacting with, especially like to me, with black boys in particular, it seemed, and it seemed like she wasn't sure how to handle the situation. So she just gives him the look, and she's like, I'm just gonna go over this side, right? So I wanted to ask you about that scene in particular. What was your interpretation of that scene? Because it was one where like it's one where I wasn't sure exactly what her reaction was saying. So I wanted to ask what your interpretation of that was.
Yeah. Well, that dynamic between Brian and Pearl was just such a fun dynamic to play. Stevante Hart, who plays Brian, he's like a brother to me. And so originally, actually, both of us went into that scene with two very different kind of depictions of what the scene actually was. And so to me, I saw it as, okay, I think Pearl wholeheartedly understands what's going on. I think she wholeheartedly understands what the joke is about. She doesn't want to laugh because she's going to think that Elena will be offended by it or she'll take offense, and she doesn't want to mess up that relationship. And Brian can get away with it because Brian has been in with the Richardsons for over a year. And so to Stevante, he saw it as, like you, well, Pearl hasn't really been through this before, so she doesn't know. And then so when we did ask the writers and approach the writers, they actually said that she wholeheartedly understands what's happening. She just doesn't want to offend the Richardsons or offend Elena. And because, Brian has been in, that field for quite a while now. If he makes a little slick joke, it's not going to affect him. But she had only been hanging out with the Richardsons for just a couple of weeks now. She's not, that close to them. So she doesn't want to do anything that's going to mess up that bond between her and Elena.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, Lexi, Al McGhee again. Well, I want to learn a little bit more about you. Have you been learning a lot about yourself and also a lot about many African Americans that have made sacrifices for you to be in this business? People such as Paul Robeson, Gordon Parks, Cicely Tyson, Hattie McDaniels, and of course, Spike Lee. Have you been learning a lot about them and also about yourself?
Absolutely. I mean, like I said, growing up, my mom, just my parents, they always made sure that I knew about not necessarily just the history of the arts, but also the history of Black arts.
Right.
I was always just incredibly immersed with the culture and history behind our people when it came to acting and when it came to, singing and all those type of things. And I think especially me being a part of Lion King helped me really just dig deeper into just all the greats that came before me, because the ensemble cast was full of, just South African, beautiful South African people. And I didn't necessarily learn just about just like African Americans actors and singers, but I also got to learn about South African actors and singers, and I got to like really understand, just get a deeper meaning behind their culture, and dig deeper to where I came from, and so just that experience was so incredibly beautiful to me. I'm constantly reading books and, watching documentaries, watching things, movies and, TV shows that, so many greats that came before me were a part of, so that I just really get a deeper understanding. And also just, I'm more, I think, grateful and humble as to what it means to be young and Black in this industry, because there was a time that this wasn't allowed. I wouldn't have been, if I was just born a couple of years before, I wouldn't have been able to do this. And so to me, that means everything, to know about the people, the trailblazers that came before me, to the point where now I can openly, act and do what I love at only, 16, and be able to wholeheartedly embrace where I come from and talk about, my experience as a young Black actress in this business. So yeah.
Young, gifted, and Black. Thank you, Lexi. And keep hope alive.
Thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much for like just how detailed you've been with us. I truly appreciate it. I want to switch gears a bit and look at your future since we've been so on your present and your past. And I read that you want to play Aaliyah.
I do.
And so
Yeah.
I want you to talk about that and why, because so many people your age are just so fascinated by Aaliyah.
Well, growing up, Aaliyah was an artist that, my parents made sure that I knew about. Ever since I was younger, I've always been infatuated with her and just everything that she stood for. She was just so effortlessly cool. And ever since I was younger, just whether that was watching her music videos or interviews, like that was something that I always respected about her. Just the fact that, she was, I believe 15, when she started, so around the same age as I was. And the fact that, at that time, I mean, it was normalized for, young Black singers or just young Black artists to, be able to have bright careers and futures. But for her to be so young and to dominate just to dominate that field, I don't know, ever since I was younger, like it always just kind of, taught me or showed me that, well, if she could do it at such a young age, I can do it too. Like if, a young Black girl that looks like me could have been, in the, top 100s and the 90s and, just dominating and was just so, well respected even at such a young age, then, maybe I can do that too. I can be respected and I could, dominate the industry as well, just like she did. And so, yeah, I don't know. It would be so cool to play her. I really absolutely just love everything about her story and where she comes from. And I don't think that, we've necessarily just, I don't know, dive deeper into just that story and just the whole truth about her becoming what she was, the beautiful young lady that she was. So yeah, I would love to play her at some point in time. I'm gonna pray on it and manifest it and hope that it comes to fruition.
Just curious, what's your favorite Aaliyah song?
Well, the first Aaliyah song that I ever heard was At Your Best, so it would probably have to be At Your Best.
Oh, cool. Isley Brothers remake.
Yep, absolutely.
Lexi, thank you so much. I want to ask you one question. I mean, you're in a hit movie. I mean, this film has really garnered the type of success that's a rarity.
Yeah.
Are you feeling the pressure now that your career is ascending to a different level? And if so, how are you managing that?
I haven't really felt much pressure, only because the fact that I have been in the industry for almost 7 years now. And so I've been working hard to get to this point. A lot of people are like, oh, well, you just arrived in the business, but it's been a long journey and a long process. And I think through those 7 years of, preparing and making sure that I've been preparing for really for a long time to make sure that I was ready for when this time came. And so when it comes to whether that's social media or interviews or whatever I have to do, I want to make sure that I'm using my platform to be as authentic as possible. That was something that I swore to myself when I was younger, that I would never get lost in what the business is. I would never lose myself or my morals for the business. And so with my platform on social media especially, I want to make sure that I'm speaking up about things. I'm using my voice and my platform to help educate my followers or people that watch the show properly on not just, it's cool that you follow me, but also let's, dive deeper. I'm using my platform to speak up about everything happening in the world right now. I'm using my platform now. I'm struggled with mental health anxiety growing up. So now I want to start using my platform to branch out and really talk about mental health, especially in the Black community, and start to normalize it so that, a young kid that looks like me, scrolls across my page or watches an interview and feels inspired and knows that, I'm just a regular kid from Washington, D.C. that just happened to make it big and, have a wonderful opportunity. And so I just want to make sure that with whatever I do, I'm authentic, I remember where I come from, and I just stay humble throughout the entire time.
And so what about balance? I mean, you are living in a different space and premieres, red carpets, first class, this, that. It's not just hanging out at the mall with friends.
Yeah.
How are you striking that balance and staying connected with your peer group and just being a normal teenager?
I talk to my friends every day. Whether it's a red carpet or it's a audition, I'm always making sure that I'm, carving out some free time for myself. And the beautiful thing about this industry is I've also made friends within this industry. Like one of my best friends, her name is Shahadi Wright Joseph, and so she's an US. And so we go to a lot of like premieres together. We go to a lot of events together. We've actually known each other. I've known her since I was 10 years old. So she's like a sister to me. And so going to these events and also like meeting, new kids like, Sky Jackson and Marcy Martin, and just like being able to like connect. It never really feels as though like we're actually at these big events. We can just kind of like take a moment and be like, hey, like we're all kids, we're at this event, but we can just kind of have some fun and, talk and be friends. And so I think that that's cool. I have my friends that, I grew up with in Washington, D.C. I have my friends that I first met when I came out here that aren't in the business, but then I also have my friends that are in the business and that do understand that hustle and that lifestyle. And so it's really cool when I am going to events or auditions where we can just find some time to be normal teenagers and just talk and have fun and hang out.
Be silly.
Yep, absolutely.
Terrific. Well, we certainly are looking forward to following you and supporting you and uplifting you as you continue to grow and blossom as an actress. So on behalf of our members, thank you very much. Enjoy Juneteenth.
Thank you. Happy Juneteenth.
And we will see you soon.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye. Stay blessed.
Bye-bye.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Take care.